2nd of February 1995.
Okay, campers, rise and shine. And don't forget your booties because it's cold out there. It's cold out there every day.
Being February the 2nd, I'm reminded that it's Groundhog Day. And I'm wondering, will Phil predict an early spring? Well, you have to see the film, and I've probably seen it about 10 times. Looking out of the train window into the dark morning, the moon is catching the snow. Soon I'll be arriving in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, which isn't so far from Gobbler's Knob, in American distances. Harpers Ferry is at the confluence of the Shenandoah and the Potomac River. It is famous for John Brown, who was an abolitionist who took the law into his own hands on that fateful night of October the 16th, 1859. 59-year-old John Brown led 21 men, including 2 of his sons, on a raid to seize control of the federal armory at Harpers Ferry. His goal was to use the weaponry to arm his army, gathering supporters that would incite a rebellion to free all slaves. But Brown's escape route was cut off, and he was cornered in the firehouse, now known as John Brown's Fort. 10 of Brown's men were killed and 7 were wounded and captured. For John Brown, he was tried and convicted for treason and sentenced to death, but his actions helped to raise awareness, feverishly writing letters cementing his cause before his long wait to the hangman's noose. For this reason, Harpers Ferry became a flashpoint that began the American Civil War, and it's become a big tourist attraction as a result, but not so much today. One might describe it as a bit dead. Many people come to Harpers Ferry to see the leaves fall, but I have arrived after the leaves have fallen, and long since turned to mush and decayed underfoot. This was Harpers Ferry on a grey day, the wind gusting along passages and through the skeletal trees, and most everybody seems to be in hibernation. It's an eerie, empty place, with only a few people about who gave me suspicious looks. I saw an Amish man with a black, wide-brimmed hat walking by a shed with a skull of a goat hanging from it. There are, however, some friendly park rangers, and one lady ranger did imply that people could be somewhat odd. I did, however, meet a friendly blind man who was on his way to tourist information, because he looked after the tourist information and very kindly agreed to look after my heavy rucksack for the day. There were many museums dedicated to John Brown, and other unnamed museums, or rather just doorways and rooms which you could enter, explore and depart, providing you with a small snapshot of the history of this town. The town was compact and picturesque, with its wooden slatted buildings, an old church with a spire, and a house almost swallowed by a tree, tainted by the sound of wind chimes. A lady in a gift shop gave me this helpful advice, that bathing in tomato juice would remove the smell of a skunk. It only occurred to me afterwards that perhaps she was hinting a shower wouldn't go amiss. Anyway, moving on from skunks, Groundhog Phil in remote Pennsylvania became a topic of conversation. "Do you think Phil will predict an early spring?" I said. The lady in grape expectation said she didn't care either way, because she was going to Hawaii. Feeling I should buy something, my eyes fell upon my favourite kind of book. A small local pamphlet-type book called A Ghostly Tour of Harpers Ferry by Shirley Dougherty. Apparently Shirley is a local celebrity and does ghost tours, but not until the spring. And so, armed with a collection of supernatural stories, I decided to undertake my own ghost tour. So it appeared that my feeling of uneasiness was not unfounded. This place is literally teeming with ghosts, spectral figures, Civil War soldiers, and even John Brown himself. Perhaps I'll meet him on my travels. I began by walking up some worn and uneven steps leading up to the small spired church. Here, the 19th century Church of St. Peter's is haunted by not just one but 2 ghosts, a spectral priest who's been seen walking around the church late at night, and a mortally wounded soldier. When the church had been used as a hospital during the Civil War, the poor soldier had laid dying whilst waiting for help, and when finally taken in was heard to whisper, "Thank God I'm saved." And visitors have reported hearing his whispered words while standing in the doorway, whereas I wasn't one of those visitors. But I have to admit it was pretty atmospheric. In the late 1700s, the town's namesake, Rachel and Robert Harper, built their house on a hill at the top of town and ran a successful ferry service. The business did very well before the Revolutionary War. However, when they were forced to pay huge taxes to England, Rachel decided she would have to secretly bury the family fortune to avoid paying the high fees. Unfortunately, Rachel died after falling off a ladder, taking the secret of where the money was hidden with her. It's said that Rachel can still be seen, staring out of the window, keeping a keen eye on where the money is hidden. In 1798, in fear of war with France, troops were stationed at Harpers Ferry. They camped on a ridge, a place now called Camp Hill. But with little to do, the troops treated the townsfolk to a daily parade, and instead of seeing battle, the soldiers became victims of a cholera outbreak, and as a result, many of the men now lie buried at Camp Hill. Since then, residents tell of rushing to windows expecting to see a parade going by, but they only hear the eerie note of the fifes and the steady beat of the drums from the Phantom Army. During John Brown's raid, a member of his group freed slave Dangerfield Newby, trying to find a way to free his wife and child, was killed with an iron spike in his neck, shot by one of the townsfolk. The town's citizens callously dragged Newby's body and threw it into the alley to be devoured by pigs. Now the alley is called Hog Alley, and Dangerfield Newby's ghost has been seen with a terrible gash in his throat, trying desperately to find a way to free his wife and child. Of course, Harper's Ferry would not be complete without the ghost of John Brown himself, and his ghost is said to appear along the streets in town. He looks to everyone like a reenactor in costume, and pose to have their photograph taken with him, but after the film has been processed, he never appears in the print. Along the railroad tracks by the US Armory is the ghost of Screaming Jenny. Legend has it that Jenny, whilst tending the fire on a cold winter's night, accidentally caught the hem of her dress alight. The flames quickly took hold, and in panic she ran out of the door, screaming in terror along by the railroad tracks, and straight into the path of an oncoming train. Since then, engineers have reported balls of flame coming towards them, followed by a scream as the train wheels screech past. Picking up the Amtrak on that gloomy evening out of Harper's Ferry, my senses are on alert, looking, listening out for Screaming Jenny. But it must be her day off.